It's July 18th, 2023. This morning they put on this thing called Ancient Skies. Um, Sorcery did, I guess. Whoever's in charge of television programming in New York. I don't know why they chose today. But it was taped. And so I watched it this morning, which I'm going to reference. It talks about something called a um, Ptolemy. It talks about epicycle. Um, it talks about retrograde movement. Now, in the rooms that I've been in, there's been no talks of the only person I've ever met in my entire life that's ever even intimated two words put together for which I completely was unable to continue a conversation with him. I was just like, that it was almost like a biometric signaling issue where I glitched. If I was a computer, I glitched. I mean, between his visual, and that was Eric, um, but in that was at World Gym in Ronkonkoma for time and space placement. But I've never heard of anybody speak of astrology at the back of the TV guide to read, to get used to the words of the astrological houses. When I was younger, before I entered school, Judy used to do that for me, just so they became a vocabulary word. But when I entered school, there was no geometrics, again, and now I'm trying to retrace my calcaneus calculus just to figure out where things, whatever, um, and how the humans are speaking about it. Because so much, it feels like so much time was wasted, and I don't know on who or for whom. I have certainly not benefited ever out of this. So I'm watching this, and then I realize I go back because I'm going to start at season 1, episode 2, which touches on Ptolemy, and the British something or other already knows about it. They have a museum about it, but again, that's not somewhere I can actually get to. I'm stuck in this U.S. Treasury system without adequate partnership or development of my person and character, even though I have this. I mean, again, Ptolemy is just the first step in the series of calcaneus calculations that I'm whatever. And I don't just have one point. Again, I developed this epicycle within other cycles for time and space and whatever. I mean, it's it's relevant. It's more important than whatever, but I feel I've just been completely mishandled. Um, so I'm going to make reference to the piece, and then I go to the first one, which was of gods and monsters. And now in the second episode, it mentions that there's a supernatural aspect that's brought into this astronomical equation. Again, that's almost like this reincarnation. I mean, how do you set oneself apart when you're amongst humans because of this very special factor that you have and that you are? Um, but then the way I was delivered out in this beyond, there's other things that are going on that are, or could be, and have turned out to be problematic.
Ptolemy's model looks extremely complicated.
It's kind of easy to look back now with this Ptolemaic model, with the Earth at the center of the universe, everything embedded in these crystalline spheres and these epicycles upon epicycles upon epicycles, and think, It's kind of ridiculous. The thing is, it worked, and you can show mathematically that if you add enough epicycles, you can actually predict the motions of all the objects in the sky pretty well, especially if you're just measuring it with your eye.
Ptolemy's model worked so well, astronomers would cling to it for the next 1,500 years. But his cosmos didn't just live on paper. His ideas were turned into physical models to teach astronomy and to study the skies.
Now, this, I have noticed, I didn't know that it was akin to this Ptolemy, but who's then somehow integrated into Rome and the empire, it will mention. And so there's that piece. I'm just now discovering this symbol is also in Flushing, Queens. They had something called a World's Fair, but it was not a known event recognized by BIE. I don't know why I noticed that this morning when I mentioned it, and then I used it as a reference on Facebook, just so I'm cataloging my daily whatever. So there's that. And then I noticed when I go back to season 1, there's a name I've never seen for the study of something, and there's a woman who looks nothing like me, but she was able to study supernatural. Now I'm a supernatural according to the Ptolemy model, and then I have this other thing going on. I'm in a homeland where the currency is the U.S. Treasury, and I look like the Allfathers or the Forefather system. So that looks correct for the area, for where I am in New York, for my life frame and my mother's life frame before me, the flower that I arrived from. So some of the mishandlings are confusing at best. And then there's this movie called Ironman 2, which references this unbeknownst Flushing event called World's Fair, which did not have a BIE acknowledgement at Bioenergy. So I'm going to finish out this piece where they reference Britain, and then I'm going to go over in Rome, and then I'm going to go to this Ironman 2 reference.
At the Science Museum in London, physicist Dr. Harry Cliff has one example.
This is an armillary sphere, and it's essentially a physical representation of the universe according to a Ptolemaic model. So,
Now, does he have a first-class education? Because I was in the United States of America, for which I appear to belong to the tribe that works with the Federal Reserve. They passed around some notes, I'm certain of that. And then the U.S. Treasury system, believing in this God, knowing I'm a supernatural position amongst the population here, for which I'm just now starting to discover, like, I might want to make mention of this, and I don't know how to do that safely, but I'm using their sorcery in order to discover what they've already studied and passed around as acceptable first-class education that they did not involve me in. I was not afforded the same level or status of education as the rest of the humans that have participated. This one happens to be in a UK territory.
So in the middle of the armillary sphere, you've got this small brass sphere which represents the Earth, and then the next closest ring to that is the Moon. Beyond that, you have the Sun, and then beyond that, you have a band of fixed stars. So this only really shows The Earth, the Moon, the Sun, and the stars, the planets aren't included in this particular model.
This armillary sphere is 500 years old, but the history of these objects goes back much further.
There's evidence of armillary spheres going back to ancient Greece and ancient China, so around 2,000 years ago. So they're very ancient instruments. They've been around for a very long time. Armillary spheres.
Now again, those are geological references along with the astronomical references for the system for which, in this part of the galaxy, I was delivered to. But's been withheld from me, while others have had advanced studies and capabilities of advanced studies of this knowledge that they are speaking on.
Two different things. So one was to teach the principles of astronomy, but there are also larger armillary spheres that could be used for astronomical calculations. So for example, calculating the lengths of the day, the times of sunrise and sunset.
Ptolemy's scientific model replaced the gods who once controlled the skies with cold, hard math.
That's a problem when they replace the supernatural entities that are amongst humans. I understand for certain ways of communicating, it's important because not everybody has to know that you're a supernatural amongst the natural, like the rest of the population, because it might put undue pressure, especially if you're delivered as I was to an unbalanced system or something appearing to be unbalanced at the time of my arrival. But that speaks to management and decisions that were made prior to my arrival during my mother's flower and then season. And again, I don't know how that was handled or mishandled, but I am in this series of rooms with only 8-foot ceilings, and I'm one of the supernaturals that were delivered to New York, and things have gone wrong.
But, like most people across the Roman Empire, Ptolemy believed in astrology. The idea that the motions of planets and stars had a real impact on our lives on Earth.
If people and stars and planets all exist as a single system, as you watch the stars and planets move mathematically, you can watch human life move. And if you can project astronomical movements into the future, the logic runs so you can predict what's going to happen to people in the future.
What we see as superstition, Ptolemy viewed as science. He even dedicated an entire book to the theory and practice of astrology.
We say
I don't have access. I just gaining access to this word Ptolemy. It's not a household word. Lewis doesn't speak of it. I don't think he's ever discovered it. Linda certainly not. And will it carry with me till tomorrow if nobody else speaks of it? Probably not. I don't know.
And the only reason why we need to be able to calculate the positions of stars and planets is so we know what their effects are on our lives.
Practical astrology required the ability to predict the movements of the stars and planets. But to make these forecasts, astrologers needed reliable data. And Ptolemy's work provided the new gold standard.
One of his great innovations was to really kind of lay out in detail his model, put it on a mathematical basis. His astronomy book contained these handy tables which allowed you to predict the motions of the planets, which was useful if you were an astronomer, or if you were an astrologer, say in medieval Europe, where kings would make decisions about what they should.
So if this is medieval Europe, does that mean that I'm in medieval America?
Should do in terms of policy or going to war based on the positions of the stars and the planets.
For the next 1,500 years, decisions of life and death, even the fate of kingdoms and dynasties, lay in the hands of astrologers who relied on Ptolemy's model. Ptolemy was a citizen of the vast Roman Empire, which engulfed the Mediterranean and stretched from northern Britain all the way to Iraq. But 300 years after Ptolemy died, and following centuries of superpower status, Rome was on the brink of collapse.
The Roman Empire ceases to have the sort of command of the world that it did. Certainly by the 4th, 5th century, the world is no longer centered on Rome in the way that it was.
The fall of Rome plunged Western Europe into chaos. Government fell apart.
I don't know where the 4th or the 5th century are. As far as Century Fox goes, I'm not sure. As far as Studio and Tudio and your god, right? Well, where does one god get to the other gods? I think that falls under, is that Poseidon? I mean, no, I heard from the Palladium it was Zeus. That's the god of all gods. I think Thor mentioned it in his Love of Thunder that came out in 78 in the year 2022. Some dates really stick out. He picked a date on the calendar. I will not forget the mention. So there's that. And then if I go to the celebrity stars in Ironman 2, which references this Ptolemy model, but in a different context, it has Rhodes inside of an air suit or machine suit with the letters ED on Ed on his shoulder. And then there's a red and gold suit with the Frank Falco lookalike doppelganger, who's some other actor. And I'm like, and they're talking about making a kill box. And I'm just like, wait a minute. This movie came out in 2010, same year that Frank Falco introduced me through the blacksmith to Tia Frio.
Reboot complete. You got your best friend back.
Thank you very much, Agent Romanoff.
Well done with the new chest piece. I'm reading significantly higher output, and your vitals all look promising.
Yes, for the moment I'm not dying. Thank you.
What do you mean you're not dying? Did you say you're dying?
That you? No, I'm not. Not anymore.
What's going on?
I was going to tell you I didn't want to
You were
alarm
going to tell me you really were dying?
You didn't let
Why
me.
didn't you tell me that?
I was going to make you an omelet and tell you.
Hey, save it for the honeymoon. You got incoming, Tony. Looks like the fight's coming to you.
Right, Pepper,
Are you okay now?
I am fine. Don't be mad. I will formally apologize
I am
when I'm
mad.
not fending off a hemorrhoid attack.
Fine.
We could have been in Venice.
Oh, please. The look-alike did not make it from a, that's not the Zarella wedding look-alike. That's a different look-alike completely. There's a different wedding, I think Spolina, that his doppelganger was brought to, which then entered the problem with the blacksmith thereafter in like these 6 sessions of how do you dice up the time and space where I'm just trying to get to something 6 foot over and I've got a whole lot of 6 foot under coming in and not knowing who's what and why they're arriving and how to get to something that I'd like to build a life with.
They're coming. Come on, let's go. Get up.
Oh man, you can have your suit back. You okay?
Yeah, thanks. Tony, look, I'm sorry, okay?
Don't be.
No, I should have trusted you. More.
I'm the one who put you in this position. Forget it.
No, it's your fault. I just wanted to say I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's all I want to hear. Partner, they're coming in hot. Any second. What's the play?
We want to take the high ground, okay? So let's put the biggest gun up on that ridge.
Gotcha. Where do you want to be?
Where are you going?
What are you talking about?
I
You have a big gun. You are not the big gun.
Tony, don't be jealous.
No, it's subtle, all the bells and whistles.
Yeah, it's called being a badass.
Fine.
At this point, I've never been paid. I'm not being paid. And I really feel, I don't know where the reward is in this being a supernatural amongst humans. But I did hear something interesting. House slave. That's what this feels like for me at the moment.
All right. You go up top. I'll draw 'em in. Well, don't stay down here. This is the worst place to be. Okay, you got a spot. Where's mine?
It's the kill box, Tony, okay? This is where you go to die.
Again, this seems like whatever, like there is this part of toxic masculinity when I was a little girl that I needed to be protected by. And I wanted to be under those wings and just wrapped in love of that man. But that's not what happened at all. In fact, it's been quite the opposite. It seems almost like house slavery and forced into situations that you did not want at all to have to perform. But that's it's been like living in this area of New York under these conditions, or whoever is running operations, or however this works. I'm going to pause this for a second, and I'm going to go back to gods and monsters and look at that special word that someone else was gifted the knowledge of being able to study. Look, she's not familial to me, but it was withheld, and I was not allowed the same level of education, but she got to something. I don't even have the word of the level of education that she got to study. Like astrology is one of it, which also was not like they weren't guiding into that direction. There was no like mentor or guidance like to actually help get to the level that needed, since I was a supernatural. No mention of me being the supernatural, although I can read based on their sorceries of what they're telling each other and teaching one another, that that's how they might look at me under certain conditions. And I don't just have one point on the Ptolemy scale. I have multiple in a symmetrical clockway. I'm going to go back. They mention Prague about a very special clock, which I just got to see today. And I mean, it by itself would have been such an honor to have been able to go there and to study, but I was not offered that either. Here's that season 1, episode 2. They talk about the fall of Rome, and then the falling into dark ages.
Dark ages had arrived. But even as the lights went out in Europe, other civilizations still carried the torch of progress.
I think that the story... Now, I was alerted by my father that I just had a conversation with him the other morning. He said that the one thing that, like, my grandfather was really wonderful, that he always read the Italian newspaper when it existed. It no longer exists in this area. First of all, I don't know how to read Italian, but they don't even offer an Italian newspaper. They only offer some foreign set of characters that I can't read those either, and they don't even look like a Latin base of, it's not a 26 letter alphabet. I don't know what it ascribes to. It's either Korean or Chinese, Cantonese, Mandarin, I don't know. I can't even classify it because I don't know, I can't recognize the symbols. But I know it's not Italian, and I know it's not English, and that exists as foreign whatever in the same area where my grandfather bought the house and lived and then passed the house directly to my father, who has been living here the entire time, and now I'm back here. And the name of the newspaper was The Progressive.
A period in which not much is happening is really wrong on a lot of levels. And one of the reasons that we've come up with this idea is because we've looked only at Europe. And I think that if we look in a broader global perspective, what we'll see again and again is that ideas are traveling across cultures.
Astronomy was already well established in places like...
Now, that worries me on the espionage and how that's being handled for, like, nationally secure issues that are going around that I think are handled by, like, the Pentagon levels, from what I can finally figure out by some of the news outlets mentioning it. Now, this is what I would have liked to have studied, but I was never given the opportunity. It was never suggested. It was never offered. And I don't know why.
The return of Ptolemy's written work helped to cement the Christian vision of the cosmos and reveal the mathematical perfection of God's universe. This rediscovered knowledge soon embedded itself in beautiful objects and incredible machines, like the world's oldest working astronomical clock, the Orloj in Prague. Whatever the weather, crowds gather to watch its hourly performance.
This has never been mentioned here. I don't even know without this one program coming on today, and I don't know that if I can't get the label for it. I mean, like, this does not exist in the day-to-day, in the rooms that I've been held within New York.
But this is more than just a clock. If you know where to look, it's a guide to the cosmos that uses an astrolabe showing the horizon of Prague and the position of the sun and moon as they move through the zodiac. Watchmaker Dr. Günther Erstmann has spent 30 years studying astronomical clocks. He's going behind the scenes at the Orloj.
I've never seen it before. The astronomical clock in Prague was built around 1410. Only very, very few original parts are still remaining. The oldest part is the stone-carved rim of the astrolabe outside.
From its earliest days,
My mother is the flower of Gundar. Instead of Gunther, it's Gundar.
there's always been more to the Orloj than astronomy.
The importance of an astronomical clock was not so much its elaborate indications or its intricate construction, it was a matter of prestige. It was top-notch technology or pride of scientific achievement and craftsmanship, which had, of course, an astronomical content, but there were only very, very few people who actually could understand the meaning of an astronomical dial.
Something like the clock in Prague is a demonstration of the prowess of the ruler who lives there, that this is cutting-edge science.
The money and know-how poured into the Orloj was evidence of a trend sweeping across Europe. Starting in the 14th century.
Now, on CBS Mornings E142, 142 this morning, which is July 18th, 2023, they mention this television series talking about AI, which seems like a very important conversation with the gifts of knowledge in America. What did they do with them? What kind of conversations were they having? This one happens to be airing on 2023, but it hasn't been had with me directly.
He's gonna hear about that one for a little while.
Yeah.
But you know, when you got a big bat, sometimes you step on it. No
You would
doubt.
know, though, right? You would know.
I would know, yes. I don't know what we're talking about.
Baseball.
Let's move this thing along.
Oh, yes, we are. We're going to begin this morning with the debate over whether artificial intelligence has a place in the field of medicine. Like it or not, it's already being used in a lot of ways, like detecting rare genetic disorders, helping ALS patients speak, and even diagnosing some potentially deadly diseases. Doctors hope AI can help save lives, and companies like Microsoft say it can save time. But can it be relied on? As part of our continuing Age of AI series, Dr. John LaPook visited the Microsoft Technology Center to sit down with Peter Lee, one of the company's top researchers.
Initiating the holographic emitter array.
There was a time when holographic doctors
Please state the nature of the medical emergency.
were purely the stuff of science fiction. In 2017, I met with actor Bob Picardo, who played the emergency medical hologram in Star Trek, to talk about how medicine might one day meet science fiction.
You think that eventually in the future, a computer algorithm could entirely replace a physician?
That artificial intelligence physician will be created from the personal experiences of a large group of doctors. So yes, I believe the day will come when you will be obsolete.
Lieutenant, I'll take care of this.
6 years ago, Picardo's prediction seemed far-fetched. But how about now, in this age of AI? I asked Peter Lee, Microsoft's Vice President of Research and Incubations.
OpenAI has said that ChatGPT-4 has scored something like in the 90th percentile on the bar. Should we be concerned in healthcare that these computers are going to replace us in some way?
Absolutely not. And by the way, GPT-4 also gets about 90% on the U.S. medical licensing exam.
But can it hold a hand?
That's the key. This is a new type of tool. It's not a human being, but it's not a computer like we're used to.
Lee considers artificial intelligence to be a powerful tool that could dramatically improve patient care and cut down on one of the biggest complaints in healthcare, paperwork.
A primary care physician will spend about 40 to 45% of their working day writing clinical encounter notes and filling out prior authorization forms. The hope is that it will allow doctors and nurses to again make eye contact and be present with their patients.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
But judging by its portrayal in movies and TV, AI has some convincing to do.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me.
Is it developing some sort of machine consciousness?
They don't have a consciousness, but they are learning from all of us.
I wondered if AI had already learned what a human practitioner has to do all the time. Figure out what's important and what's not.
How old would you like to be for today's visit?
Oh, so let's say I'm 50 years old, mildly elevated blood sugar.
Okay.
I have a bellyache. It comes and goes.
Physician assistant.
Again, I get this is what they do for boards and for practicals. I'm going to pause this and then I'm going to go to this other episode of Ancient Skies, which references, I mean, again, that's medical diagnostics for some level of doctorate that exists that I haven't been offered either. So I'm going to pause this and then go to this Gods and Monsters program where they mention mythology and they have this very specific word that I wouldn't even know how to get a degree in it. It's not even a word I know how to pronounce at this point, but it does show who followed that path of knowledge and who was allowed to learn that level of study for which I was not offered the same opportunity. So this is Ancient Skies, which originally aired July 24th, 2019. I taped it on July 10th, 2023.
Mythology and religion are almost essential ways of explaining.
And again, I would say he has a first-class education. But again, he sounds closer to another area of Europe where I am is in North America. So I don't know how the education systems are connected or disconnected by the time of my arrival, or for my mom right before I arrived.
The cosmos.
In ancient Egypt, the sky was personified by the goddess Nut.
Now, I learned just recently, Nuit. Parlez-vous français avec moi? Nuit. N-U-I-T. It's exactly how the Egyptians pronounce Nut, I think is, or actually in Dutch, I think I've also seen it written as C-N-U-T. But I think the C is silent. But again, these are things I've discovered on my own. I don't know why they're relative. I don't know why they're pertinent. And I don't know who collects that level of data. But I have made a note of it on my own account.
Who curved her body of stars over the earth. And the moon was associated with the gods Thoth and Khonsu.
Now, these mythologies, I don't know if they're counterproductive to the Ptolemy model for which I was born as a flower, as a fruiting flower, and then I have a epicycle within my flowering season in a very specific way, for which I don't have that level of intelligence surrounding me, and I don't know, I've almost been kept from being able to get to that path that I needed to, and prior to this fruit in my season, and I don't know why that was done that way either.
These supernatural beings also inhabited the stories we told about how the universe itself came to be.
We explain things we can't understand through using stories, because none of us really can comprehend how the universe started.
There are stories to explain the origin of the cosmos from all over the world. For the Aztecs of Central America, it was the goddess Coatlicue who gave birth to the moon and stars. For Hindus, the god Brahma sat atop a lotus flower as he created the earth, the sky, and the heavens. And in Chinese mythology, a hairy beast called Pangu emerged from a cosmic egg and divided the forces of yin and yang into earth and sky. But our earliest surviving creation myth dates back almost 4,000 years to the ancient Babylonians. It's called the Enuma Elish. The Enuma Elish tells the story of a colossal battle between Tiamat, the primordial goddess of the sea, and the god Marduk.
Marduk is described in extraordinary terms. He's got fourfold vision.
Now, she has a doctorate, or it says DR in front, and it says ASS, A-S-S, or Assyriologist, and she went to something called a Wolfson College, University of Oxford. Never heard of it, don't even know how to reference it other than just stating the words. But that's what it is. And I have never, a Assyriologist, not something I've ever heard in the house, not from where I arrived. And so, but she seems very educated on this version of mythology. I don't know how that exists while my Ptolemy and my actuality of a supernatural inside of Ptolemy, inside of the US Treasury system for my national. I don't really understand how these other side stories and other side mythologies are being used.
He's got the aura of 10 gods. He's unfathomable and unvisualizable in his splendor.
Marduk took up the mace and held it in his right hand.
At this point, this is a parable, but I don't know who writes the papers on that and who ascribes a supernatural position to these myths and legends in some type of performance. I have no idea.
Tiamat and Marduk drew close for battle. And locked in combat. Tiamat opened her jaws, but with his merciless mace.
Now, I've only heard Poseidon and Zeus reference, and they just gave me that announcement again through palatial means by the River Hudson in the Hudson River Museum in the state of New York as a way of gathering information. Where I grew up and under a protection of 3 Glenway, just beyond the Museum Palladium was Glenview Mansion, where again, my grandfather built me a dollhouse in a very large scale dollhouse and had a very specific roof and whatever to it. And it seemed to have this like crossover or otherworldly knowledge to whatever is being exhibited in that very real, gilded, historically referenced home inside the same state that I'm in Queens still. If I go back to reference the season 1, episode 2 of Ancient Skies, it says, returning to center, tracking major changes in scientific understanding about Earth, including flat Earth legends, was what this one was on.
Starts moving forward again.
Modern astronomers call this retrograde motion. To accommodate these strange movements, Ptolemy added another element to his model: the epicycle.
An epicycle literally means a circle upon a circle. So if you have an object, say Mars, orbiting the Earth in a perfect circle, Mars is also making a smaller circle around that bigger circle, and that actually can help correct some of the motion that we see in the sky that doesn't fit with it moving in just a single circle around the Earth.
It's concentric circles. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It's Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxy is broken. And it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.